at the end of January. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? This week, we creep over into February. I love the month of February. February is this like little short jewel of a month stuck right in the middle of winter. At least for us here in our part of the world, it's winter. It's a little short month, and there's some really great stuff in the month of February. First of all, let's acknowledge the Super Bowl next Sunday, right? Go Falcons. There's a little team called the Falcons in it, and there's a little bit of enthusiasm about that. I don't know, but it's kind of fun to live in a city where the Super Bowl team is playing, right? So it's awesome. And so that's in February. I don't know how it snuck out of January into February, but my whole life it was in January, and all of a sudden now it's in February, but that's beside the point. And then in February is my absolute favorite holiday, Valentine's Day. If you ever want to know why that's my favorite holiday, I'd love to tell the story, but I love Valentine's Day. My daughter's birthday is in the month of February, which makes it that good, and it's Black History Month, and we get to explore that topic, and it's the season for peace and nonviolence. Lots of good things in February. But this Thursday, February 2nd, is the weirdest day of all. Does anybody know what it is? It's Groundhog Day. That's right. This little groundhog comes out of its burrow, out of its den, and if it sees its shadow on a nice sunny day, it means we have 6 more weeks of winter. And if it doesn't see its shadow, it means that spring is just right around the corner. That seems backwards to me, but that's okay. So I don't know if you know this, but the Canadians did a study. They looked at 40 years of data, and the groundhog was accurate, wait for it, 37% of the time. Almost as good as Glenn Burns. But anyway, 37% of the time. 37% of the time. So we have this special day on the calendar in my favorite month for a rudimentary form of weather forecasting, right? So I don't know why we don't get the day off. I just really don't. It's special. So you might be wondering, why am I talking about Groundhog Day on a Sunday message? Well, there happens to be a movie that was made in the 90s called Groundhog Day, starring Bill Murray and Andie MacDowell. Did anybody see it? Okay. So now, the millennials are going, I have no idea what you're talking about. And many people haven't seen it, or you haven't seen it in a long time. So let me just kind of give you the premise of the movie so that you can kind of follow along with the talk. So here's the deal. Bill Murray's character is a newscaster. He's actually a weatherman. And he is assigned to go to Puxatawney, Pennsylvania, to cover the Groundhog Day activities. Now, Puxatawney Phil is the most famous groundhog of all, and they cover it on the news every year. And so Bill Murray's character is going to cover this. And so he has to travel from Pittsburgh out to Puxatawney, Pennsylvania the night before, because the groundhog gets up early and he has to be there before the groundhog wakes up. So he wakes up in the little village and he goes about his day doing this newscast, interacting with the various people in the town, including Andie MacDowell, whose character happens to be his producer. Now, Bill Murray, in this particular role, is the most curmudgeonly, grouchy, negative, spiteful, sarcastic, negative person. And you just cringe as you watch him have all these interactions with beautiful and lovely people, but he just ruins everything. And so he covers the activities, and then a snowstorm prevents him, a blizzard actually, prevents him from being able to go home at the end of the day. So he has to spend the night in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania again and wake up. Now, when he wakes up that second morning, the very same radio song plays on the radio. It's I Got You, Babe, if you want to know what the song is. You hear it a bunch in that movie. And it signals to Bill Murray that something weird's going on, and the viewer begins to realize as well that something strange is happening. And so Bill Murray realizes quite quickly that he's living Groundhog Day again. And he has to go through the very same interactions with the townspeople, the same interaction with the groundhog, all of that again. And he's stuck. He's stuck in a time loop. So he keeps living that day over and over and over again. Now, don't forget, he didn't want to live it the first time. So to have to repeat it over and over again is miserable for him. And he gets more and more and more desperate. He wants to break the time loop. And so he does lots of very negative things at first. He even commits suicide, and he even kills the groundhog at some point. He's trying everything to get out of this loop. So as the movie goes on, he begins to wisen up and realize that if he's going to live this day again, he might want to try some different things. He might want to try some conversations different, interact with people differently. And he begins to learn that there's some wisdom in being more cooperative, more kind, more loving, more gentle, more positive as he moves throughout his day. And again, he's just trying to break the cycle. Now, in true Hollywood fashion, he falls in love with Andie MacDowell's character. And for a couple of rounds around the loop, he doesn't do a very good job of communicating that to her. But eventually, he expresses his genuine, true love for her. And when he does that, a snowflake falls. And that's a new event that hasn't happened in the movie yet. And it signals to the viewer and to Bill Murray's character that it's broken. He's free. He's broken the time loop. So that's basically the premise of the movie. Now, I know it sounds silly, but I really invite you, go ahead, rent it, I dare you, and watch it from a spiritual perspective, and watch him move through and learn the lessons that he has to learn as he relives this day over and over again. So today, around the world in our spiritual centers, we are talking about how to use it. That is the lesson title for the day, how to use it, or how to live in alignment with this one power that we operate with. How do we live in harmony with spiritual law? Now, Reverend David started this back to basics lesson plan a few weeks ago when he talked about the thing itself. And he taught us that the thing itself is God. It's the life energy that lives everything and lives as everything. That's what the thing itself is. And he went on to talk about what it does. And what this life energy does is it receives the ideas and the thoughts that we have, and it co-creates our life experiences with us. That's what it does. Reverend Jim talks about how it works. Last weekend, he talked about that. And what he shared was that energy is parceled out to each of us equally. We all have that life energy flowing through us. And we work with that life energy and we express it in our lives any way we choose. We get to decide how we choose to live. And so he reminded us that we co-create the life that we all experience together. We co-create that with all of humanity. So that's a co-creative process. But he also said that we are responsible, solely responsible, for our experience of that reality that we have created. We get to choose how we show up. So we learn here in this teaching that we must first change our thoughts if we are going to change our lives. That's pretty foundational understanding. We use the awareness that this teaching gives us to kind of learn how to live more in alignment with spiritual law. And we can use this more fully in our lives when we are awake and aware. So just like Bill Murray's character, when we're awake and aware of what's going on, or more fully conscious, because that's what he did in the movie, he got more and more conscious of what he was doing, we can create a vision for our lives. His vision was to get out of the time loop. We can create a vision for our lives as well and create that vision and live it more fully. So as we go through the basics of these lessons in January, we're kind of going over the first four preambles, if you will, to the textbook. And so I'm talking about how to use it, that fourth section. And on page 53 of the textbook, this is what Ernest Holmes says. He says, we should learn to control our thought processes and bring them into line with reality. And he capitalized the word reality, so a bigger reality. Thought should tend more and more toward an affirmative attitude of mind that is positive, stable, and, above all else, toward a real unity with spirit that is already complete and perfect. So he uses the phrase, tend more and more, meaning we should be paying attention to the direction we are headed in our lives. So what direction is your life heading? Are you heading into a life that is more and more stressful? Is your life getting more and more fulfilling, more peaceful? Are your relationships tending to be sweeter and better? Because all of these external effects, all of these things that are going on in our lives, originate in our thoughts. Whatever direction our lives are heading, you can know that that's the direction your thoughts are heading. And Holmes emphasized that our thoughts should be moving toward those that entertain and hold the idea of a real unity with spirit. Now, I think the choir just illustrated that point in their song so well when they said all these qualities of God: peace, love, joy, compassion, forgiveness, happiness. I don't even remember all the words they sang, but they talked about it being the blood in their veins and the breath in their lungs. That's a real unity with spirit, understanding that the qualities, the words that we use to describe God itself are words that we can use to describe our inherent nature. We are one with that. And in order to train our minds to think like that, we have to try on new thoughts. And when we can override these old habitual thoughts with these new thoughts, when we can really let it be the air in our lungs, then things will shift in the experiences that we have, because the thing itself works with us always. Raymond Charles Barker, who was Kennedy Schultz's teacher — Kennedy Schultz founded this center — his teacher, Raymond Charles Barker, said it this way: we evolve spiritually in exact ratio to the number of seconds per day that we are thinking rightly, thinking of God, thinking of good. How many seconds per day do you spend thinking of God, thinking of good? I know we waste a whole lot of seconds, don't we? But when we can basically harness our mind energy to think of God and think of good, we're going to get somewhere in our lives. We're going to evolve spiritually, as Raymond Charles Barker says. This Groundhog Day movie is compelling, I believe, because I think we realize that's really how life works. I think we realize that we are here to live this day by divine assignment. The life energy continues to breathe in as and through us, and we're given another day. So we're here by divine assignment. And we're here to live the day that we have created. We're here to interact with the people that we have called forth into our lives to experience life with. Whether that's the people we live with, the people we work with, or whatever. They're the people that are around us. So we're called to be here by divine assignment, to be with those people. We're also called to be here today to do the job that we've agreed to do, to express creatively the way we've shown up to express and create. And so that's by divine assignment as well. The situations that are going on in our lives are the situations that we created, that we called forward into our experience. And just like Bill Murray's character, we must choose how we show up in that divine assignment. What attitude do we bring into the conversations? What are our patterns? How do we interpret what is happening around us? How do we interact with others? In short, how will our minds direct our path this day? We choose the perspective with which we view the world, with which we view all the people around us and the situation around us, but also the way we view everything around us. When we're conscious, we choose from a higher way of being. When we're unconscious, we live our habits, don't we? We just live a habitual way of living. We live out the patterns day after day that are in our comfort zone. The patterns that really reflect who we think we are and how we think life treats us. Unconscious people do not understand the law of cause and effect, that we are constantly causing, that we are constantly co-creating with the thing itself to draw these things to us. And unconscious people fail to remember that how I treat anyone is how I invite them to treat me, because we are all one. And guess what? When we're unconscious, we relive those patterns day after day after day. Now, the day may not look exactly the same. You might not hear, "I've got you, babe," every morning. But it is a pattern repeated over and over again. Maybe not in a time loop, but nonetheless a pattern. The faces may change, the job titles may change, but the patterns remain the same, because the patterns are what we have co-created with our thoughts, how we've used the thing itself to surround us. Just as Raymond Charles Barker pointed out, we must use our minds willfully and intentionally to think of God, to think of good. Bill Murray's character could not change the circumstances around him until he could change his mind about them. And mostly until he could change his mind about the people around him. Life is about relationships. Life is all about relationships. And how we choose to think about other people really influences the kind of life that we live. So think about this. Do you find yourself having the same kinds of conversations over and over and over again? Here's another question. Do you find yourself complaining or worrying about the same things day after day? Perhaps you've found yourself in a new intimate relationship and you realize, I'm arguing about the very same thing I was arguing about with my ex, right? Or you're in a new job and just after a little honeymoon period, you're feeling just as restless about this job as you were feeling about the job you left to take this job. Because there's that saying, wherever you go, there you are. So how do we stop living Groundhog Day? We have to raise our consciousness. You know, we teach that consciousness is an awareness and an ability to make a fresh choice. That concept is also foundational in our teaching. So when we're living at a higher level of consciousness, we're more aware of what's really happening on a spiritual level, and we're more free to make a new choice. We're here this morning in this spiritual philosophy seeking that higher consciousness. We're striving to stay more fully aware of what's really going on. We want to be more completely aware of what drives us, what's our motivations behind the things that we're doing. How can we, if we know we create our lives with our words and our choices, how can we make better ones? How can we raise to a greater level of awareness so that our lives look better? Because when we're fully conscious, we're not limited by past choices. We're free to make a new choice and step out of those patterns that we have constantly repeating. Holmes says this: we must become more if we wish to draw a greater good into our lives. We know we want a better life. We all have an idea of a better life for ourselves, but we must become more if we wish to have it. And he says that we must pay the price for that which we receive, and that price is paid in mental and spiritual coin. So we must become more if we want more, and how do we purchase that more is through mental and spiritual coin. We must diligently work to manage our relationship with our minds and with the law in order to create a new future for ourselves. So we're learning to use new things. So here's what learning a new thing looks like in my life right now. I don't know about you, but right now in my adult life, the thing that I'm learning to use the most is my phone, okay? So here's how that happens. I see my child, usually it's my millennial daughter, doing something way more efficiently than I've ever done it before. Just a friend, you know, they get to Buckhead without getting stuck in traffic using an app, or perhaps they calculate the tip at dinner so quickly, or last weekend we were using the phone to figure out how much NFL players weigh. It's the phone. We do it for everything, right? So you see someone, I see someone doing something more efficiently, and I say, what app are you using? What are you doing? And they go to the app store with me, and they help me download the right one or whatever. And then if it's my daughter, she goes and tells me exactly how to do every little bit about it. But most of the time, you just walk away from that, and you have a new app. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have time for a tutorial. I'm not really interested in all of that information. I just want to move forward. And so we begin to use a new app. And that works swimmingly well most of the time until like 3 months later someone points out that I missed this whole feature of the whole thing. But I think that's how we should learn to use the science of mind principles as well. We have to use them. We actually have to use affirmative prayer. We actually have to use speaking affirmations over our lives. We actually have to use the spiritual laws, forgiveness and gratitude and all these other things. And that's how we learn to use things in our modern world, by using them. And I really invite you to step in to start using this, using the thing itself to create the life you want. We have to recognize that there's a more perfect way of living, and that there's an app for that. And the app is a new thought. It's a new thought. And then we have to start moving in a new direction by practicing new choices that better reflect our understanding of how life works for us, and practice with discipline. I'm just as likely to turn that app off and drive the way I want to drive, right? But I might get there faster if I actually follow the app that I downloaded to do. And that's kind of how life works too. Your life really actually may improve if you use the science of mind principles that you're here. You have an app on your phone. There's a new SLCA app. And I think there's wisdom in that. We have to act our way to a new possibility, a wider and higher vision for our lives. That's how it works. We have to make more expansive choices. Marianne Williamson points out that all choices in life are based on either fear or love. Bill Murray's character starts out the movie making all of his choices based in fear. He had a deep-seated fear of not being enough, of having this meaningless assignment and not making a difference, of not mattering. He had a fear, it's pretty obvious, he had a fear that people wouldn't like him, that he would be rejected, that he would not be important. He made all of these decisions and interactions based on fear. And then he eventually began to move into this possibility of love. And he began to see that perhaps cooperating with the other people would make a difference in his life, would break the pattern. He began to include people and cooperate with people and change, open up his heart and allow people to interact with him more authentically. And as he did that, his day became sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, and his choices became more reflective in the people around him. And he learned that, thankfully, the movie would probably still be going on. So, let me give you an example of this in my own life. Many years ago, when I was kind of at the beginning of my career, I was on a team of coworkers. And you know how when you're young in your career and you have a team and you're all working together and you love it and everything's going good? And then we'd get a new policy or a new procedure or a new supervisor or a new something. And we would start complaining. Just going to lunch and not having a very good time accepting a new change. We didn't want anything to change. We loved it just the way it was. And so we would complain. And in the midst of all of that complaining, I realized that 2 of my favorite coworkers were going to leave. They were going to move on and find something else. And I didn't want that. I didn't want them to leave. I wanted things to stay the same. But I also didn't want to just sit in the complaining. And I had a new idea. I had the idea of perhaps I could apply for a job in management. Perhaps I could try something new, become a part of the team that made the decisions. And then, not only did I have that new thought about myself, I had to act on it. I had to actually apply for it. And there was a lot of pressure, because when you've got a pattern going in your life and there's a whole bunch of people participating in that pattern, they don't want you to change. They don't want you to change. They want everything to stay the same. And so there was all that, they'll never pick you, and you haven't been here long enough, and who do you think you are, that kind of thing, all that pressure to stay the same. But I acted on that new thought, and I applied for the job, and I got the job. And then I had to start believing different things about myself and realizing I could be a part of a bigger picture. I could go on a different trajectory in my career. And that action put me on a higher path. It created more abundance, more solution, more opportunities in my life. And that continued. But I had to act on the bigger idea that I had for myself. I had to step out of my fear, and I had to break a pattern. And doing so allowed me to love myself more and allow the world to appreciate me more as well. And I broke out of the pattern of just complaining and watching people leave. So take a look at yourself. Where are you in your life? Where are you in your divine assignment that brought you here today, that your soul has called forth in this human experience? What patterns based on fear are you still repeating over and over again? Where are you shrinking back in fear of failure or fear of not being good enough? And here's a real good question. Where in your life are you letting a broken heart or a disappointment keep you from living fully and powerfully? How can you start to move, just to scoot in a direction, to step forward the next time that pattern comes around, because it will come around again, and make a higher choice, a choice based on expressing love, especially love of yourself. Sometimes the groove of our patterns is so deep. If you've been living a pattern for years and years, the groove can be so deep. It's very challenging to climb out of it and think a higher thought for yourself and make a new choice. I get there. I've been there. I get it. I encourage you to do what I did. If you can't think a higher thought for yourself, find a practitioner, find a minister, find someone who can help you identify a thought or a possibility that's outside of your pattern, that's higher, that's more loving. And let them hold that for you. Because when I can't hold a new truth for myself, I know my practitioner can. It's one of the first calls I'm going to make. Can you please know something for me that's better than this pattern that I've been living? And then once you have that new thought, run that thought. Let that thought begin to lift you out of whatever the groundhog pattern you've got going on. Use these science of mind principles on a daily basis to sustain a new thought for yourself. Use the thing itself. It's waiting to co-create with you in every single moment. It's always waiting for that. And guess what? Groundhog Day is Thursday. It's a great day to remind yourself to break your patterns, and it will come around again next year to remind you again. Happy Groundhog Day, happy February, and so it is.
Hi, I'm David Alt, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One. another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.